What if everything you thought you knew about your family, about your own mother, was a carefully constructed lie? For years, I was just the shadow, the forgotten son. But last Saturday, at her own retirement party, something inside me finally snapped, and I unleashed 30 years of silence that exposed a truth no one saw coming. My name's James. I'm 29. And up until that Saturday, I honestly thought I'd made peace with how my family saw me. Or rather, how they didn't see me. I thought I'd accepted that in every family photo on my mom's wall, I'm either completely cropped out or just conveniently forgotten. I really believed I'd grown a thick enough skin that their little jabs at family dinners wouldn't sting anymore. Turns out, I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. Let me rewind a bit. Growing up, it was painfully clear that my older brother, Eric, was the golden child. I'm not talking about the usual, he's older, so he gets to do more kind of favoritism. I mean, from the earliest memories I have, my mom would absolutely beam at Eric for the tiniest achievements, while barely even glancing at mine. Eric would score a goal in soccer. Boom. Cake, balloons, a framed photo in the living room for weeks. Me? I won first place in the regional science fair, and I got a dismissive, "Oh, that's nice, sweetie," as she kept scrolling on her phone. My dad wasn't really around. He left when I was about 6, and honestly, that's a whole other mess for another day. But the important thing is that after he left, Mom raised us alone. Or, to be more precise, she raised Eric. I was just there, a quiet, awkward presence, always on the fringes of the family dynamic, like a distant cousin who somehow overstayed his welcome. I tried, though. I really did. I studied hard, stayed out of trouble, did everything I thought she wanted, just hoping one day she'd actually notice me. But no matter what, it felt like I was shouting into a void. Eric, on the other hand, could do no wrong. Even when he did do wrong, like getting caught drunk driving in college, it somehow became an endearing anecdote. Boys will be boys. My aunts would chuckle every Thanksgiving. Eric's always had a wild streak. Oh, and guess who bailed him out? Me. I paid his fine with my savings and never got a single thank you. Not one. Fast forward to last weekend, Mom's retirement party. She'd been a public school teacher for 35 years. They rented out an entire community center. Caterers, decorations, a slideshow of her life, the whole 9 yards. And Eric? He was naturally the master of ceremonies. Me? Despite being the one who handled all the logistics behind the scenes, booking the caterers, setting up the slideshow, arranging the guest list, I was just another attendee. No mention of me in the introductions. No thanks. But I was used to it. I've been used to it for years. So I just smiled, sat near the back, and clapped along like everyone else. Then came the speeches. Eric took the mic with that confident swagger he always had. You know, the kind that only comes from being told you're special every single day of your life. He talked about Mom's hard work, her dedication, her sacrifices. All true, absolutely. But then he said, with this nostalgic little chuckle, "Mom, thank you for raising me alone. You gave me everything. You raised me to be who I am today." The room chuckled along. Heads nodded. But Mom laughed. Not a soft, modest giggle. No, it was a deep, genuine laugh, like he just told the funniest joke in the world. She leaned toward the mic, took it from him, and said, with a dismissive wave, "Well, he was the only one worth raising." I swear, for a full second, my heart stopped. And then my aunts, Mom's sisters, they nodded, like it was some obvious truth they'd always known. One of them even whispered, loud enough for the table to hear, "He really was such a blessing." James was always just there. It felt like someone had cracked open a window in a blizzard. That sharp, icy sting in your lungs. That feeling of air slicing through your ribs. I sat there, frozen, every cell in my body burning. I could have stayed silent. I could have let it slide, just like I always did. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe pain, maybe just 30 years of being utterly invisible, snapped. I stood up slowly. I could feel the heads turning before I even said a word. My hands were shaking, not with nerves, but with something heavier, a weight that had built up for almost 3 decades. I walked to the front. I hadn't planned to take the mic. I hadn't planned to say anything at all. Eric looked confused. Mom looked annoyed, as if I was interrupting something that wasn't mine to be part of. BMC, one of Mom's coworkers, politely held the mic toward me. I took it, then I looked out at the room. Rows and rows of people who only ever knew the version of our family that Mom had told them. Coworkers, cousins, neighbors, people I hadn't seen in years. People who had absolutely no idea what I was about to say. I started with something simple. "Hi, I'm James." A slight pause. "For those of you who don't know, I'm Elaine's other son." A few people laughed lightly, thinking I was making a joke. I wasn't. I took a breath. I wasn't planning on speaking today. I thought this was her moment. But then I heard something that I think deserved a little clarity. The room quieted. One of the aunts tried to clear her throat loudly, like a warning. Mom's smile had tightened into something brittle. She raised him alone. I continued. "Sure." She put in the hours, the work, the late nights, the parent-teacher meetings. But just so everyone's clear, she had 2 kids. 2 boys. One got the spotlight, the attention, the support. And the other one got, well, this. I gestured to the mic, a chance to finally speak because no one thought he ever would. Eric was frozen, absolutely still. Mom crossed her arms, lips pressed in a thin line. I could see her scanning the crowd, worried. Not for me. For appearances. I wanted to stop. I really did. But something inside me needed to be heard. I needed someone, anyone, in that room to know what it had been like. So I kept going. I talked about the missed birthdays, the parent-teacher conferences she skipped, the art show she never came to, the soccer games I sat through alone. I brought up how she smiled at Eric's mugshot, like it was a funny prank photo, while I got grounded for getting a B in math. People were silent now, utterly still. I could feel the momentum building inside me, like a wave. Like every suppressed word I'd swallowed over the years was clawing its way out at once. My voice started to shake, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't anymore. I was angry. I was tired. And then I said it. I didn't get raised. I got ignored. You could have heard a pin drop. And just as I was about to say what happened the day Dad left, just as I was about to share that secret, the one Mom made sure never left our house, I locked eyes with her. She knew what was coming. Her face turned pale. Her lips parted slightly. And then she shook her head. Just once. A small, deliberate gesture, barely noticeable to anyone else. But to me, it was deafening. It was the same look she gave me the day Dad walked out. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 6. Eric was 10. Mom was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, arms folded, jaw clenched. Dad had a suitcase in one hand, car keys in the other. He didn't even look at me. He hugged Eric, ruffled his hair, and told him, "Be the man of the house now." Then he glanced at me, blinked like he'd forgotten I was there, and turned away. I cried. Not loudly, just a small whimper, the kind of kid lets out when they're too confused to really understand what's happening. I looked up at Mom, hoping for a hug, a hand, anything. But instead, she looked down at me and said, "He was never really yours. Don't act like you lost something." I hadn't thought about that moment in years. I'd buried it deep, deeper than anything else. But that look she just gave me, it dragged it all back to the surface like a hook in my chest. So I tightened my grip on the mic. "I was 6, I said, my voice trembling but firm. "And I remember exactly what you said when he left. You told me I didn't lose anything, that he was never mine. And I believed you. I figured if even you thought I didn't matter to him, then maybe I didn't matter at all." Gasps. Real ones this time, from a few of Mom's coworkers, a couple of cousins. Aunt Louise even put her hand to her mouth. I spent years thinking I was the problem. I continued. That I wasn't good enough, or smart enough, or interesting enough to deserve the same love Eric got. And I didn't say anything. Not when you forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Not when you call me ungrateful for asking why Eric's college was fully paid for, but I had to take out loans. Not even when you told people I moved away to be selfish, when in reality, I left because this house, this family, made me feel like I didn't exist. Eric finally stirred. He stood, took one cautious step toward me. James, come on, man. You're blowing this out of proportion. This isn't the time. I turned to him, slow and calm. Isn't the time? When is the time, Eric? When you're getting praise for being the golden child again. When everyone's passing around photo albums where I'm literally cut out of group pictures. You had 30 years of speeches. 30 years of being the only one worth raising. I get 10 minutes. He sat down hard. I scanned the room. People were squirming. Guests who had once smiled politely now looked stunned, unsure whether to stand and leave or stay frozen in their chairs. One of Mom's friends tried to smile at me encouragingly, like I just opened up about something brave. She clearly didn't get it. This isn't about jealousy, I said before anyone could try to twist it into that. This isn't about me wanting a spotlight or a trophy. It's about the fact that a mother of two raised one son and told the other one, every day, in 100 subtle ways, that he didn't measure up, that he wasn't wanted, that she regretted him. That got her attention. Mom's mouth tightened. Her jaw shifted. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought she might actually say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe a justification. Instead, she stood up slowly, took a few steps toward me, and said, "You have no idea how hard it was." She didn't say it with anger. She said it like I was a child who couldn't possibly understand. Like this was her moment of pain now. I had to keep the house together, she went on. I had to work 2 jobs. Your father left me with nothing. I did what I had to do. I never blamed you for the struggle, I replied. I blamed you for pretending like I wasn't part of it, for erasing me from the narrative, for acting like he was the only one who mattered. I gave you everything I could, she snapped. No, I said. You gave Eric everything. You gave me leftovers. You gave me silence. We stared at each other. The room was holding its breath. Then she dropped it. The mask, that thin layer of politeness, the one she always wore in public, shattered. Her eyes narrowed. You always were so dramatic, she said with a disgusted little shake of her head. Always playing the victim. Poor James. So unloved, so unappreciated. That's why no one connects with you. That's why you've never had a real relationship. That's why even your father don't. I cut her off. My voice was low, but deadly sharp. Don't you dare bring him into this. You let him leave me behind. You watched him hug one son and ignore the other, and you agreed with it. Another pause. A deeper silence now. One that didn't just fill the room, but felt like it sunk into the floor, the walls, the very air itself. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't shocked that I said any of this. She wasn't ashamed. She was annoyed. I had disrupted her narrative, her perfect retirement send-off, her golden boy tribute, her look how strong I was as a single mom story. But she wasn't the only one with a story. I looked back out at the guests, at the people who'd come to celebrate a woman they thought they knew, at Eric, still slouched in his chair, pale and quiet. And I said, "You want to thank her for raising you alone, Eric? Fine, thank her. But don't pretend I wasn't there. Don't let her pretend that this was some noble sacrifice where she did her best with what she had. Because what she had was 2 sons. She just chose one." I turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. A slow, hesitant clap, followed by another, then a third. It wasn't a standing ovation. It wasn't even half the room. But a few people, just a few, started clapping. Some awkwardly, some genuinely. One of Mom's coworkers, a man I barely recognized, gave me a small nod as I passed. But it wasn't about the applause. It was about finally being seen. And just as I reached the double doors at the back of the community center, someone called out my name. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Eric. It was someone I never expected. It was Aunt Denise. Now, you have to understand, Aunt Denise was the quiet one. She was always there holidays, always brought the same sweet potato casserole, always smiled politely, and stayed out of the drama. In our family, staying quiet wasn't just a trait. It was a survival strategy, and Denise had mastered it. I honestly don't think I'd ever heard her raise her voice once in nearly 3 decades. So when she stood up, her chair scraping sharply against the floor, and said, "James, wait," every head turned. I paused in the doorway. I didn't want to. Everything in me was screaming to keep walking, get in my car, and never look back. But something in her voice. It wasn't pity. It wasn't condescension. It was something else. I turned. She was walking toward me slowly, like even she couldn't believe what she was doing. Her eyes flicked to Mom, who looked almost amused for a second, like she was waiting for Denise to scold me, to put me back in my place. But Denise didn't look at her again. She looked at me, and then she did something no one else had done that entire day, maybe my whole life. She hugged me. Not a half-hearted side hug. Not a forced good to see you pat on the back. A real, full, 2-arm hug. She pulled me in like she hadn't seen me in years and didn't want to let go. And when she finally stepped back, her voice cracked as she said, "I should have said something a long time ago." Behind her, I saw my mom stiffen. Denise turned slightly to face the room. Not dramatically, not like she was trying to make a scene, but with a quiet resolve that was somehow louder than anything I'd said. "You all saw it too," she said. "Don't pretend you didn't." The silence in the room shifted. It was no longer the stunned, uncomfortable kind. It was guilty silence. Denise continued, her voice growing steadier. We let her pretend like she was raising one perfect child and one shadow. We let her talk about Eric like he was her whole world and James like he was a phase she had to tolerate. I remember the birthdays, the school plays, the graduation where James gave the valedictorian speech and Elaine left halfway through because Eric wasn't feeling well. That one hit like a punch to the chest because it was true. I'd stood on a stage, smiling through my speech, pretending not to notice the empty chair in the front row where Mom was supposed to be. She texted me that night. "Sorry I couldn't stay. Eric had a headache." A headache. You all remember those things? Denise said, softer now, "You just didn't say anything. None of you did." And James, she turned back to me, eyes glassy, "I'm sorry for being part of that silence." I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. A lump swelled that I hadn't expected. For a second, I thought I was going to cry. Not out of sadness, but relief. Like something heavy had been set down after being carried for so long. I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. "I wasn't a good sister to you," Denise said, quieter now, "but maybe I can be better now." I nodded, unable to do much else. Then came the ripple. One of Mom's coworkers, a petite woman with graying hair and a floral scarf, stood up and cleared her throat. "I've worked with Elaine for almost 20 years, she said. "And I'm sorry, but I never knew she had a second son." I blinked. She talked about Eric all the time. The woman continued, fidgeting with her bracelet. But I don't remember her mentioning James. Not once. A murmur spread through the room. A few more stood, hesitant, awkward, but clearly shaken. One of my older cousins, Evan, glanced at me and then said, "Man, I always wondered why you stopped coming around. Figured you were just the quiet one." I didn't know all that. Mom, meanwhile, had gone completely still. Her expression hadn't changed, but her hands were clenched at her sides. Her smile was gone. And Eric, he looked lost, like someone had pulled a rug out from under his entire reality. Because here's the thing about golden children. They only shine as long as everyone keeps the lights focused on them. But once people start turning their heads, start asking why the spotlight is so narrow, that shine starts to look a lot more like projection. Mom finally stepped forward. The calm, collected mask she always wore, it cracked. Not broken, but cracked like thin ice under too much pressure. "You've made your point," she said to me, each word cold and deliberate. "You've embarrassed me. You've turned my retirement into a spectacle." I looked at her, steady. "No, you did that. The moment you laughed and said I wasn't worth raising." She stared at me for a long time. And I saw it, really saw it. Not just the woman who raised me, or didn't. Not the teacher who dedicated her life to shaping young minds. I saw someone who couldn't handle being wrong. Someone who had written a story about her life and refused to accept that she'd left a whole chapter out. Then she said, voice sharp and tight, "Do you think I had a choice? Do you think I had the energy to raise 2 kids after what your father did? I picked the one who made it easier, who didn't question me, who didn't need so much." It felt like a confession and a slap in the face at the same time. "You picked the one who let you pretend everything was okay," I replied. "That doesn't make it right. It just makes it easy." She looked around, truly realizing that the room was no longer with her. People weren't smiling. They weren't clapping. They weren't even making eye contact. And that, more than anything I said, seemed to rattle her. She turned away, didn't apologize, didn't defend herself. She just walked back to her seat, picked up her glass, and sipped it like it was water. Like if she pretended hard enough, none of this had happened. But it had. It absolutely had. And as I stood there, heart racing, the mic still warm in my hand, I realized something. I wasn't done yet. There was one more thing they all needed to know. One more part of this story that no one in this room, not even Eric, knew. So I turned back to the crowd. My voice was quiet, almost gentle, but clear. "There's something else you should know about my dad." And just as I saw Mom's eyes widen in panic, I dropped it. The secret, the one that changed everything. I took a breath. "There's something else you should know about my dad," I said, steady now but sharp as a blade. "He didn't just leave on his own. He left because Mom gave him a choice. Eric or me." Gasps rippled through the room. A glass clinked somewhere as someone set it down too fast. All eyes were on me now, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with the kind of stunned silence that comes when people realize the story they thought they knew was only the surface. Mom's glass stopped halfway to her lips. I looked straight at her. "You told him he could stay in Eric's life, but if he wanted to stay in mine, too, you'd make sure he never saw either of us again. You gave him an ultimatum. Pick one, son, just like you did." It was true. I found out by accident 2 years ago. Dad tracked me down after I'd moved across the country. We met up, sat awkwardly at a diner booth. And after the small talk and apologies, after years of pain and confusion, he finally told me. "I thought I could be the dad you needed," he said, his voice shaking. "But your mother, she said if I didn't walk away from you, she'd take Eric and vanish. Change her name. Move states. She said she'd make sure I never saw either of you again." And I knew she meant it. I remember staring at my coffee for a long time, trying to make sense of it, not sure which betrayal hurt more, his or hers. But now, standing in front of a crowd of people who finally saw the truth, it didn't matter. Because now everyone knew. The room was silent. I continued. "He chose wrong, and I've told him that. But at least he admitted it. At least he tried to make things right." I turned back to Mom. "You never did. You kept the lie going for 30 years. You painted yourself as the hero, the victim, the martyr, and you fed everyone a version of your life where I never existed." She stood up then, slowly, and for the first time in my life, she didn't look strong. She didn't look in control. She looked cornered. "You think you know everything," she said, trying to sneer, but it came out flat. "You think that makes you right?" "No," I replied. "But I'm done pretending you were." Then I turned to Eric. He hadn't moved, hadn't said a word. His mouth was slightly open. His expression stuck between disbelief and something else. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. I didn't care anymore. "I don't blame you, Eric," I said, loud enough for the whole room. "You were a kid. You were just playing the role she gave you. But you're not a kid anymore. You've known the truth for years. And you said nothing." He flinched. He deserved to. "You let her erase me," I said. "You helped." That was when I saw his expression crack, just for a moment. Like something inside him finally clicked. Like maybe he was seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. But I didn't wait for an apology or a speech or a tearful reconciliation. Because this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I stepped off the little platform, handed the mic to the stunned MC, and walked out the double doors of that community center. No one followed me. No one stopped me. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was walking away from a family. I felt like I was walking towards something. My own damn peace. In the days that followed, things changed. My phone lit up the next morning with texts from people who had been at the party. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, former neighbors, even a few of Mom's old coworkers. Some were apologizing, others were just shocked. More than one told me I said what everyone had always felt but never had the courage to say. Aunt Denise messaged me privately, said she was proud of me, that she'd be there if I ever needed anything. And she meant it. Eric emailed me, a long, rambling message that started with excuses, detoured into memories, and finally at the bottom said, "I don't know if I can fix this, but I want to try. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. Maybe I'll reply one day. Maybe not. That part's up to me now." As for Mom, she hasn't reached out. Not once. I've heard from others that she's spinning her version of events, that she says I hijacked her party, made everything about me, twisted the truth. Fine. Let her. Let her live in that little world she built where she gets to be the victim and I'm just the angry, ungrateful son. She doesn't get to define me anymore. Not now. Not ever again.